With the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, His truth to all this gathering, people who, with God's help, will lead the future generation. And in so doing, we may be able to sanctify His name and bring peace to this world. God's attribute, one of God's attributes is shalom, peace, with God's help. Amen. Firstly, I'd like to thank the students for Justice for Palestine, Hashem, and all the others who were involved here for making this happen, and for the university for allowing us to speak here. I really appreciate this. I'm humble. It's a great privilege to us. It's a requirement. We feel it's one of our requirements as one of our great leaders, Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine. Nothing to do with the Israeli rabbinate. We don't recognize that, but truly the rabbinate of Palestine. Around 30-odd years ago, he passed away, and he said that it's a requirement of us to stand up and speak at the cost of our lives to let the world know that we are being falsely represented around the world by Zionism. So we feel for us it is a great privilege to be able to speak at this, especially at opportunities where you're speaking to, like I say, future leaders with God's help, and speak around the world to convey this message of peace, of godliness. So we're very thankful for all involved who arranged this, and we're thankful to all of you who've given of your time. Time is precious. Everybody has a lot to do. And with God's help, we hope it'll be worthy of your time, that you will find that it is a great accomplishment. Now, the time is really not possible in such a time span, such a short period of time, to be able to convey all the issues that are involved and to explain what has been misconstrued throughout well over 60 years, or over 100 years actually, of what is happening in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, what Zionism is, what Judaism is. But we hope just to open the window of opportunity to be able to give you a chance to be able to study this, to step back and to, out of the box, you would say, to step out of what you've been fed throughout your life if you've been living in Western civilization. And then, unfortunately, even if you've been living in other parts of the world, a lot of times the news, the media, people have had a free ride with the media, what's called the mainstream media, that was basically in the hands, we believe, of the Zionist leading people. Either they were Zionists themselves, or they simply found it practical to go along with the narrative fed by Zionism in the world of what happened in Palestine, what the history was between Jews and Muslims and so forth. And we find this is a real nakba, it's a real tragedy. And we hope, with God's help, we'll just give you the opportunity to step back, study the subject, and come to your own conclusions. And with God's help, we are certain that you will see a totally different narrative, a different history, and you will find that it is a real nakba, and we can only turn to the Almighty to change what has evolved from this history, from Zionism and the State of Israel, to return it to what it was, and God's help to be able to serve God together as we've had for hundreds of years. So thank you all for coming. Basically, the subject that they've asked us to speak about, they call it Love Thy Neighbor, Jewish History, Coexistence, Relationship prior to the occupation of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. It hurts always when I read lines like that. It's like somebody comes over and they ask you, where are you living? I'm living in Virginia. You get along with your neighbors? Well, yeah, I get along with my neighbors. Why not? But you're Jewish, and your neighbors are Christians. How do you get along with your neighbors? You're two different religions. It's impossible. No, it's possible. I'm telling you, I get along. I can tell you this story and that story. And you know, and it's somebody listening to this, you guys nuts. But he's asking questions. I mean, it's just, you walk away from him. Yet when we speak about Palestine, or some people from a Muslim country, and it's almost natural. You lived in Iraq, you lived in Yemen, you lived in Tunisia. You're kidding. You lived in Palestine. You got along with your Muslim neighbors, and you have to start explaining and all that. Now that hurts. That is a real a knife in the heart. Why? because Jewish people have enjoyed the graciousness, the hospitality, the friendship, the love of Muslim people prior to any human rights observing groups or anything like that, or United Nations. Jews have been living in armed Arab and Muslim lands for hundreds and hundreds of years. And in fact, it has been Arab lands, Muslim lands have been a safe haven for Jewish people throughout hundreds and hundreds of years, by the times of the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, and World War II. And any time in between, Jewish communities have flourished, and it's been a safe haven for Jews. And it has never been an issue of a difference of religion to be able to live in a harmonic coexistence, to be able to live in the same courtyard, in the same house. This has never been any problem. And therefore, it's mind-boggling, it hurts, it's a nakba, how everything has changed in the last 100 years. And why has it changed? It has changed because of a difference, a change in religion? Has Judaism changed? Or has Islam changed? The ones who are truly religious, the ones who are truly observing their religion, will say on the contrary, they're trying their utmost to uphold the religion as it was hundreds of years ago. There is no difference in the writing. And yet we find that there is this tremendous mistrust, there is this hate, animosity, fear of one of the other. So what has changed? I could take you on a tour of Egypt, to Jewish areas, where they lived, the Jewish quarters, where I was just there, or I was just in Lebanon 2 weeks ago and marched to Jerusalem. You can go to any Muslim country and you will find that there is Jewish communities, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish community centers, and places where the Jews flourished as very religious, God-fearing communities. It was never a problem. So why? What has changed? All of a sudden Islam teaches hate of Jewish people. Why? Is it beneficial for them that they should be considered by the world as racist? It really doesn't make sense. Years ago, hundreds of years ago, maybe that would have passed. You could have been a racist, and no other country would have condemned you. Today, on the contrary, there's the United Nations, and you're condemned for being racist. So why is there this animosity? Why is it there seems to be a religious conflict? Well, the truth is, it's the works of Satan. It's the works of Shaitan. There's anybody, if you're a person, well, I'm speaking, I hope, to a lot of people who believe in God. I know that we're ridiculed about the creation of the world. We're ridiculed about that there's anybody who controls this world. Well, we proudly state that we believe that there's a ruler to this world. There is the Almighty. And in Him we believe, and we believe that He controls everything. To Him we pray, and we turn to bring peace, and so forth. And we believe that it can't be anything else than the works of the Satan that could have allowed the creation of this state of Israel that has been created in the land of Palestine. Why? Because there is no reason or legitimization of creating this land, the state of Israel, in the Torah. There is nothing to do with the Jewish religion that allows for us to steal a land from a people, to steal homes from a people, to uproot people from the homes who've lived 18 generations, or he says, as my colleague states, that before the Dead Sea was dead, they were living there, or something like that. But whatever it is, there's no legitimization to steal this land from the Palestinian people. And there is no legitimization at all in the Torah, mind you, of creating a so-called Jewish state. It happens to be that according to the Torah, the concept of having a Jewish state is forbidden even if the land would have been uninhabited. We would still be forbidden to have a Jewish state. And it is a fact that if you will go around the world to any Jewish community that is truly religious, that is a God-fearing community, that is, we'll call it very religious, whether it will be in New York, in the United States. New York is the center of very religious Jewry. You can go to Manhattan, just look across across the Williamsburg Bridge, you will find the Jewish community that's the most large concentration of religious Jews, and there's not one Israeli flag there. They're all anti-Zionist. If you will go in Jerusalem, in Mea Shearim, in Quds, or if you will go to London, Stamford Hills, which is the religious community, the very religious community in London. I don't know if you can find maybe here and there a flag, an Israeli flag. Why? Because the more religious, the more anti-Zionist, the more anti the concept of this so-called Jewish state, the state of Israel, they are. Because why? Because the concept of creating a state in Palestine or any other place on the world is expressly forbidden for us. Because of many reasons, and I'll just touch on a few reasons that you should understand how clearly it is contradictory to the Jewish religion. And therefore, the concept of taking the homes away from the Palestinian people is totally something which flies in the face of everything that what it means to be a Jew. The Torah, as a Jewish person who's following, observes or holds the Jewish teachings, knows that what it means to be a Jew is one thing, and one thing only. It means subservience to the Almighty. It means to uphold the covenant that we made with God on Mount Sinai a few thousand years ago. And this is what Judaism is. Closeness to God, being subservient to Him, following His commandments, the concepts of godliness. One of our concepts is that just as God is Mahu Rachum, we say in Hebrew, just as God is compassionate, you must be compassionate. You must emulate God. And that is all what it means to be a Jew. God sent us to the land of Israel, to the Holy Land, a few thousand years ago when we left Egypt. But He stipulated that in order to be able to remain there, we must be on a high level of holiness. And if we won't, then, God forbid, we will be banished from the land as a nation. As individuals, we will have to continue living there. And that came about with the destruction of the temple. If anybody, 2 temples actually, there was one that was destroyed and the Jews returned, and then the second was destroyed. Anybody who looks at any of the books of the prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, any one, you will find this clearly spelled out, that the Jews were warned by the prophets that they will be sent out into exile. They will not be able to remain as a nation because they weren't on this high level of holiness that is required. And with the destruction of the second temple, the Jewish people accepted this bitter medicine from God, this punishment from God. At the same time, it's a medicine because we were told by God that eventually God is totally compassionate. God is good. We believe that this concept of being banished from the land, that we are sent into exile, is not a permanent issue. It is something that one day we believe, and this is the basics of Jewish teaching, the 101 Jewish teachings, that one day the Almighty will make a metaphysical change, will make a miracle, where all humanity will recognize one God, and then there won't be a conflict about this, there won't be any dispute, there won't be any questioning of this. There will be a spirit of godliness where the atheists will believe in God, everybody will believe in God, and then we will go up as a nation and serve the Almighty. But if I have to stand there and turn to somebody and say, hey, with a gun, give me the land, it's my land because God gave it to me, then the whole thing is a farce, it's false. We believe, and this is what we pray, we don't talk about, the Jewish concept is nothing about praying for a piece of land, that we were yearning for a piece of land. We were thrown out of our land, and now we're yearning to take back a piece of land. That's missing the point entirely. That's not what Judaism is. Judaism is closeness to God. We were unfortunately sent away from the table of God, the house of God, and one day, by praying, we pray to Him and try to better ourselves and serve Him. We believe one day there will be a miracle, all humanity will recognize God, then we will go up. That is what Judaism is. Judaism is religion. Zionism is a transformation into something entirely different. It's a transformation from religion into nationalism. It's a transformation from godliness into base, selfish wants. A yearning for a piece of land, have an Olympic team that's going to win gold medals, what they'll call Maccabees, using Jewish names,
a strong army. They'll be a proud nation like the Italians have Italy, and so forth. They're going to have a country. What they've done is they've taken the shell of what it means to be a Jew, the symbols of Judaism. They've taken the Star of David. They've taken all the clothing, the outside shell of Judaism, and they're claiming that this is what it means to be a Jew. But they're missing entirely the point of what it means to be a Jew. We say in our prayers constantly, because of our sins we were sent into exile. And the solution is something entirely different. The solution is closeness to God. It has nothing to do with a piece of land. Yes, we believe that God will eventually build a temple, and we believe that God will build this without any human intervention. God will make a temple and all humanity will go up and serve Him. That's what we believe. Zionism is a base nationalism that they have estranged themselves from God and from religion. The concept of stealing is spelled out in the Torah. You're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to steal. All these concepts are breached, are broken by this group of people called Zionists. Let me explain something to you. Don't think for one moment that there's a difference of opinion between Herzl, may his name be obliterated, and what we say about what they consider Judaism. Zionism, in their own writings, Theodor Herzl wrote, and mind you, we quote them from their own writings. But first of all, I'm reaching to the right page. Let me just mention Zen Jabotinsky, also a father. Oh, I got it here already. Theodor Herzl wrote in his own diary, I have an excellent idea. He wrote on actually page 14 of his diary. The way to solve the problem of anti-Semitism is to speak to the head priest of Vienna, to get an appointment with the Pope, to make a mass conversion of all the Jews of Austria to Catholicism. It should be done on Sunday in the middle of the day with music and pride publicly. We are the last generation that held on to the faith of our forefathers. The conversion would be in St. Stephen's Cathedral, and on and on. In other words, his solution to what Jewish people are suffering anti-Semitism, and we're not talking about what Zionists do, that they create anti-Semitism, but people who hated Jews because they were Jews. The solution is that we should simply go away of our religion. And he carried this out further. In his own life, he had one son, his name was Hans, and he did not circumcise the son, which is, if anybody knows, in Judaism and in Islamic religion, that's part of the covenant between the human being and God. And people have given their lives throughout history. Jews have given their lives to be able to do circumcision on their children. Theodor Herzl, living in Vienna, proudly wrote in the newspapers that he has one son and he's not going to circumcise him. And then he has the audacity to come and say that he's representing Judaism. Jabotinsky, who was also a father of Zionism, wrote in an article in 1919, well before the creation of the state, and he was a mentor of Begin, Menachem Begin. And this is what he wrote. In the national home, we will announce, they're going to create a national home that they're planning. In the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile, and they refuse to shave off their beards and their payas, this is called payas irlax, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote. Mind you, if I would just read this statement, you would say a Nazi wrote it. This must be Hitler's statements. But this is Jabotinsky, one of the fathers of Zionism. So don't for 1 minute, and I can go on and on and on, I have writings of all their leaders, don't think for one moment that when they come along and they roll their eyes and they start speaking about our attachment to the Holy Land, that God gave us the Holy Land, it's ours, that there's something underlying, there's something holy, or something based on the Torah, or that God promised to them. But it has to do with a con job. What they're doing is, these people who don't have the morals of God because they're estranged from God, and what they've simply done, they've stolen our identity, our social security numbers, our symbols, the Star of David, the name Israel, the name Judaism, and they're using it to intimidate people around the world and to accuse the Palestinian people and the Muslim people of being anti-Semitic. And that's very good today in this day and age when we went through Hitler, where millions of Jews were murdered and the world was silent and people feel guilty. So when you point at somebody and you say, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're going in the way of the Nazis, then people get intimidated, they get fearful, and they feel that they must do something, that they can't stand back and watch the Jews suffer, and watch how these Muslims and Palestinians are going to do something bad to the Jews. So what they're using, the Zionists, with a ploy. They're using the Star of David, the concept of Hitler, and so forth. They're using all of the Holocaust, and they're claiming in the name of Judaism the right to take the land. But it's pure hypocrisy, and it's pure based on immorality, because they don't have the godly ruler of morals, that you shouldn't use something that's not yours, and in order to be able to gain something that is illegitimately taken. What they're doing is they're claiming the right to Palestine that they know they have no right to, because Jewish people don't aspire and we don't yearn to take this piece of land until God reveals His glory with all humanity will open serve Him. We don't want to take this piece of land. We want our neighbors, the Palestinian people, to rule this land and have what is theirs. Yet they are coming here because they have these national aspirations. These people who have lost this godliness, the concept that that rules a person, that tells them don't steal something when you see something in a store. Don't take it just because you like it and you smell something that smells good. You're going to steal some food from a bakery. What stops you? What stops a person? So a child will look around and will see, is anybody watching me? But the parent will tell that child, there's a God who's watching you. And that's what stops the person, and that's how we train our children. The Zionists have lost this godly ruler, and therefore they were able to clothe themselves, this wolf in the sheep's clothes. They put on this rabbinic clothing. They made a rabbinate. They made a chief rabbi and a rabbinate. And they're dressing this immoral, this Satan, they're dressing it in the clothes of the Star of David, in the name Israel, which is in the Bible, Yisrael, the name of Jacob, and they're saying, God, and they're waving the Bible as a deed to the land, and they said, God gave me this land. Well, I'd like to understand something. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been spread out in the diaspora. They've been spread out throughout the world. And there have been times what's called the golden age of Judaism. Anytime you study history, knows of the golden age of Judaism. We could have easily afforded to buy land. And in fact, there's many rabbinic responses, that means answers, when they were questioned, rabbis were questioned, should we buy a piece of land? Should we go to Palestine and end our exile? And the rabbi said, it's impossible. Have patience. Believe in God. God is compassionate. God sees every human being suffering. But now is not the time. You cannot simply go and take the land. It's a godly punishment of our sins that we've been sent out of the land. And the only way, the only remedy to this problem of being spread out throughout the world is when the Almighty will decide to end exile, that all humanity will recognize God. Then we can go up and go up and serve God together in this land. All the nations, we said, we said all the nations will go up and serve God. We say in our prayers, and anybody can read, everything was translated in English, the Jewish prayers. That is what it's all about. But to go and take the piece of land, first of all, you cannot be successful in doing that. What will happen is will be tragic results, because in the Torah, God expressly spells out to us that if anybody, God foresaw there will be people like Zionists, and He warned us. It's spelled out in the teachings of the Torah, in the prophets of King Solomon, that if we will attempt to end exile and return to the Holy Land, then we will be hunted like animals. God forbid. It will be tragic results. And anybody who looks at our site, mkusa.org, the Jewish writings, many writings, and links of our sites, you will see that God foresaw this, that there will be people like Zionists who won't get it. They won't understand what their purpose is on this world. They'll be estranged from God, and they'll simply think that they want a piece of land, and that's right. So God warned us. It says in the words of King Solomon, in the book called Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, that God put the Jewish people under 3 oaths when He sent us into exile. 1, do not return en masse to the Holy Land, and we have observed this strictly, mind you. Nobody attempted to breach these oaths. Secondly, do not rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside in. This is a strict requirement of Jews. This is, maybe you heard the Maharal of Prague. Many others, the rabbis wrote that people have to give their lives as Jews to observe and uphold his commandments. And thirdly, do not make any attempt to end exile, any form of attempt to end exile. And Jews who understand what it means, their religion, understand that we can't. We will never do it. We won't fight the hands of God. Secondly, it won't accomplish anything. In the same prophecy of King Solomon, that he warns us not to breach these oaths, he warns us that it says, "Shbarati Eschem b'nos Yerushalayim, I put you on the oath of the daughters of Jerusalem, the tzavos v'yos hasada, with the deer and the buck of the field, and to iru them to oilus ahavat shetefet, if you will awaken my love prematurely." That God is warning us. It's written as a metaphor, and nobody refutes that this is the explanation of this. The Talmud explains this in Ksuba, page 111. I put you on the oath, the daughters of Jerusalem, meaning the Jews. Do not try to awaken my love prematurely. If you will, then you will be, it says in the verse, like the buck and the deer of the field, you will be hunted like animals. Like we've seen in World War II. The Jews were hunted like animals. And this, many rabbis stated, was because many rabbis said we breach these things, Jews were not acting properly, we don't question God. We are taught that we have to, anything that happens there, we have to be introspective, understand why God did this, and try to better ourselves. Maybe just make a disclaimer. We're not in any manner stating that God will not punish the Nazis with an exacting punishment. When somebody does a crime to somebody else, if somebody is a drunk driver and runs somebody over on the street, he'll be punished. But the one who was run down, that person wouldn't have been run down if it wasn't the will of God. We don't know why it's the will of God, but we have to be introspective. That is what it means to be a God-fearing human being. That is we're taught in Judaism. We have to understand. So by World War II, many rabbis said there were people who weren't, why God brought about this Holocaust, we don't know. But one thing is certain, that we have to be introspective and accept what God did. Nazis will be punished, but we have to try to understand it. And many rabbis spoke about the fact that it came from Germany, where the majority of Jews wanted to assimilate. They became reform Jews, and they thought that way they'll stop suffering from anti-Semitism. And where did it come from? From the place where they were the majority reform, where they left the folds of the Torah. But other rabbis said that we were being punished because we breached the oath of exile. Because Zionism didn't start in 1948. Zionism didn't start when they created the state, when there was a ratification of the state in the United Nations. It started almost over 60 years before that. It started in the end of the 19th century. Over there, when they decided this movement of Zionism to start going up to Palestine and creating a state, so they started bringing the wrath of God on us. And rabbis afterwards were being led to the gas chambers, said we are being punished because we didn't stand up, we were silent, while the Zionists are taking over the Jewish nation. So again, it's a very, I know it's a radical issue. I'm going off on a tangent. It's not for you, for the broad public it's a subject by and of itself. But the fact is that the Jewish people are warned by God that by breaching the oaths of God, by going and taking the land away from the Palestinians, from killing and from stealing, by doing that, by creating the state, we are only bringing the rage of God on us. And instead of being a protection for the Jewish people, like the Zionists want to claim, that what they're doing is they're creating an insurance policy. We were happened by the Holocaust. We have to have an insurance policy, a safe haven. Anybody who believes in God knows that not only God having they brought a safe haven, what they're doing is they've created an endless river of bloodshed, not only of the Palestinian people, which if anybody who really would like to look at the real history and the facts on the ground, but they've created, their hands are covered in blood of Jewish people. Look at their own cemeteries, how many Jews have died, and how much of factories of exacerbating anti-Semitism around the world have Zionism created. The fact is that you go to the Muslim world, you go to the Middle East, you go to how many people misunderstood, today misunderstand what it means to be a Jew. They think Zionism and Judaism is one and the same. And when you go to Europe, you travel around Europe, how many people have come to hate Jews because of this this terrible creation, this oppression of the Palestinian people. So what they've done is they've become a factory of exacerbating anti-Semitism. As I say, there's an endless river of bloodshed simply since they've created the Zionism in the state of Israel. The towns that people have been living in prior to 1948, these were town after town after town, hundreds of towns that the Palestinian people were living in, and they were, as my esteemed colleague was stating, we were living together, Jews and Muslims, in Palestine. We have people, my colleague who's with me today, Rabbi Rosenberg, is 8 generations Palestinian. We have people in our communities who was just as a doctor was stating, we have people in our communities who remember how they lived in the same house. They lived together in peace and babysat each other's children. The most precious thing you can have. They babysat each other's children. I'll just read to you a letter that's actually from, it's called a defunct newspaper. It was Jerusalem Report. I believe it's defunct. It doesn't come here anymore. But basically there was a writing there about a reporter who went to Yemen. And he went back to visit his friends there. He wanted to see how it was again. He hadn't been there for quite a while. And I'm just going to quote a few sentences. And this is written by Naftali Hilder. It's Jerusalem Report, March 11th, 2002. And he said, Naftali Hilder is writing, Ya'achi, my brother, he wrote, here's my mom, exclaimed Masood emotionally, pointing to the woman in the creased photograph. Masood is a Muslim from the Al-Nazir Abayad tribe. He lives in Wadi Amla, and an oasis in the remote desert region of northern Yemen, close to the Saudi border. The woman in the photograph, an unlikely mother to Masood, is Kadia Sabari, a Yemenite Jew who emigrated to Israel a few years ago. The brother, who he said, my brother, he called him his brother, is Yaakov Sabari, who went to Israel with the first group of immigrants in August 1992 and settled in Rehovos, south of Tel Aviv. Yaakov, sitting in the sand during the recent visit to his former home, explains, what is going on here? Why is he calling him his brother? And this is his mother. She's Jewish. He's Arabic. We'll explain the family relationship like this. Masood and I are the same age. When Masood was born, his mother did not have enough breast milk. So my mother nursed him as well. So they were brothers. And this is, I can tell you story is story, fact after fact, that anybody who goes to the old Jewish community who's not trying to misconstrue history, you come to our neighbors, you will hear the Jews cry and speak about how they lived together, how, door by door in Jerusalem, in quotes, in every single, in Iraq, there's a book from Giladi, who wrote a book on Ben Gurion scandals, it's called, about how again I'll go off on a tangent, the Zionists, in order to create panic for the Jews to leave Iraq, they put bombs in synagogues, so they were caught. Maybe, and there was other areas that go to country by country what they did to create a rift between Jews and Muslims. But I went and interviewed this fellow Giladi, and he told me how he lived together in Iraq, how the rabbis would walk on the street and the Muslim children would go and kiss the corners of their clothes as respect. There's so much more of this that I can give you information about, but that's a fact. Why? Because again, there is no religious impediment to peace. There is no such thing as a religious conflict. Yes, there is a difference. We have a distinct way of serving God, but this is no impediment or reason that we cannot live and serve God together and flourish as Jewish religious communities and Muslim religious communities. And history, anybody who wants to question this, say, oh, it's a theory, it's a nice theory, but it's a lot of baloney. History attests to this. Hundreds of years we've been flourishing in Muslim communities. Then Zionism came about. These Zionists, the ones who detested their own religion, who were ashamed of their religion, who said people with beards and payas should not have a place in our society, who would be second-class citizens, these are the ones who came along, yet, being that they didn't have this godly moral, so they walk around and they decided, mind you, they wanted to create their national home, not in Palestine. They wanted to go to Patagonia. They wanted to go to Uganda. And it's a fact. The only reason that they went to Palestine is because they realized that they need massive backing. You can't create a state. You need massive influx of money, of backing, support. And therefore they decided to go to Palestine very simply. Take my identity, the Jewish identity, wave the Bible and say, this is my deed to the land. And get out of here, the Palestinians. Really, they have two stories to tell you. I'll just give you a parable. Somebody went and borrowed a pen from somebody, and then the guy comes and give me back my pen. So he said to him, firstly, I never borrowed the pen from you, and secondly, I returned it already. That's exactly what they came along. They come along and they say, first, they come along and they said, well, let me just tell you something. First, it was a land without a people, for a people without a land. And second of all, the only reason they don't want to accept me here in their home is because they're a bunch of anti-Semites. That is the way they approach the thing. And how selfish they are. The Jews could have a little state. What does it hurt them if we have just a little piece of land? There's so many Arab lands. Such nonsensical arguments. The fact is that it's like if somebody would come and say, just give us Rhode Island. China has a lot of overpopulation. They need a little, just give us Rhode Island. How many United States, and I'm not condoning violence in any manner, but just understand that the logic in that. But let me just put logic aside. If they're coming in the name of Judaism, let them know that they are totally transgressing God's word. We are forbidden to take this land of Palestine. Palestine has to be totally under Palestinian rule with this total and speedy and peaceful dismantlement of this illegitimate state. It has not one right of legitimacy, 1 inch of legitimacy in the name of Judaism or in any name whatsoever. I just want you to know, don't think, because the people that I'm going to finish here, there's going to come some fellows, going to come along and say, hey, he's a radical, they're from some type of radical group, and therefore, let me tell you something. We published a book, again, come to our site, nkusa.org. It's called The Rabbis Speak Out. These are the words. You can simply, if you're not lazy, just go around the Jewish communities around the world and see that the very religious communities, the more religious, they're anti-Zionist. And it's first of all, and understand that the religious communities are people, the very religious communities, they're giving their lives for their religion. We don't send our kids to public school. We pay taxes, and we pay a fortune of school taxes. If you would know what we pay in our areas in New York, yet we don't use the public school system. What we do is we use private schooling because we have separate boys and girls schools. We have our religious teachings. It costs fortunes. Kosher, like halal, costs fortunes. Our lives cost fortunes. People are poor in our community, yet they give their lives. And yet, mind you, and the issue of compassion that they feel for other Jews, because of course we're being accused of being not compassionate, not worried about our Jewish brethren. The ones who created Bikrafo, visiting of sick in the hospitals, bringing food, not only to Jews, Muslims, whoever needs. We go to hospitals, if anybody knows, in the tri-state area, and any place with these hospitals, visiting the sick. We have Hatzalah, free ambulatory service. I can go on and on and on. Charitable organizations, massive amounts of charity goes out from them. Why? Because it's part of serving God. If we have to emulate God, to be compassionate. So why don't we want the state of Israel? Why don't we worry about an insurance policy after Hitler? Because that's not an insurance policy. First of all, if it would be an insurance policy, we don't want it because it's a rebellion against God. But it's not only not an insurance policy, it is a selfish state that has created, as I said, endless rivers of bloodshed. Look how much anti-Semitism, all the Muslim countries, again, as I said, I don't want to repeat, but they hate that as the mistrust. Why? Not because of their religion, because they decided to create this state in another people's land, in a Muslim land that's because themselves a ummah around the world. The Muslims feel responsible for that. So what have they done? Caused bloodshed, anti-Semitism, hate, a rift between Jews themselves and a rift around the world. We want the world to understand they don't represent Judaism. They cannot represent Judaism in any facet. In every facet, it's a rebellion against God. And in my view, I just want to, like I was saying, but I was saying, besides going around and looking at the communities, look at the history. The Rabbis Speak Out is a book, 130-year record of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. That means, if somebody's going to come home and say, oh, that's an Ashkenazi Jew from Eastern Europe who's speaking, but the other Jews around the world did accept Zionism. No. Around the world, Sephardic, Ashkenazic, that means from Middle Eastern countries, African countries, all the leaders of Judaism, who are true leaders, opposed Zionism. Yes, there was a handful of bad apples. There was Herzl, his name should be obliterated, who joined Zionism. Yes, they'll find a few people, and I'm not going to question his knowledge, but that's not the point. A person could use knowledge for very bad purposes. Around the world, every Jewish community, all the leaders, I'll just mention one, the Chofetz Chaim, Israel of blessed memory, who passed away in 1933. He was one of the leaders of Judaism. Everybody knows that. He knows Judaism. And I'm quoting him. He wrote, "The Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot." He's considered today the codifier of the law, his books. And I can go on and on. The Jews around the world, the ones who are true rabbinic authorities and their communities, and the laymen who still are true to Judaism, we totally reject the concept, the transformation of our religion into this nationalism. We reject Zionism in its entirety, and we reject even 1 inch of the existence of the state of Israel. That means that if, because of political reasons, because of frustration, because of no choice, they will accept a part of the vision, and that some type of thing called two-state. We as a Jewish people can never accept even one. We are happy what's given to the Palestinian people, but we can never, as a Jew, accept 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty in the Holy Land. We will never accept that, with God's help, if we are true to our Judaism. And we also say, and when the Oslo Accord started, I remember, I'm a little older than most of you, with God's up to 120. My colleagues went to Madrid, I went to Washington, and we stood and we demonstrated when they made the Oslo Accords. We said, and the Oslo Accords were the beginning of the two-state solution. We said, we're very happy for every inch given to the Palestinian people, and we're not naysayers. We don't want to see people dying. But we're telling you that there will never be a true peace as long as there's this rebellion against God, the state that they're creating, that's spitting at God and saying, you can't send us into exile. And I'll give you another, just a concept you should understand what it means. It's like the father punishes a son who's done a terrible, and the father warns him, don't do this, don't do this. The kid did it again and again. So the father pushes him out. And he says, you must stay in the corner for 10 minutes. And the kid comes after him and he said, oh, I'm going to do you a favor. I love you, I'm coming back to you. The father says, don't do me any favors. And he's only enraging his father. The concept of these people coming back and taking the land is spitting, God forbid, so to say, at their Father in heaven. The creation of the state is a cause of tragedy and nakba in every facet. It is not accepted by Judaism and not accepted by the Jews who are true to Judaism. And let me just tell you, I'll be finishing. Just in case you think that they have, supposedly, that these people are really very concerned about the Jewish people, and they have a love for Jews, and they're really concerned about the well-being of Jews around the world. Besides what I mentioned before, that they said that Jews with beards and pay should be second-class citizens. But you should know that since the day they've come up to Palestine, that terrible cursed day, they've been beating Jews and killing Jews since their arrival there. And we have facts, documents, and pictures that is never shown to you. But if you look, pictures going up here, Jews who stand up simply, peacefully. We are never armed. We are never armed. Our history is not to be armed. We stand up and we demonstrate against the existence of the state, and they're brutally beaten. As we stand there, Jews are arrested and beaten. And they're killed. They die days after. They don't use live ammunition on us as a general rule because it will be a scandal. They used to use rubber bullets in my youth, I remember. Today they use truncheons with lead piping. They arrest, they beat people. Maybe the first known martyr in the world was a Danish Jew who wanted to go to Parliament in England. His name was Dr. Dahan of Westminster. In 1924, he made a meeting between the chief rabbi of Palestine. Again, nothing to do with the Zionist rabbinate, the chief rabbi, that's far. But the chief rabbi of Palestine, whose name was Rabbi Zonnefeld of blessed memory. In 1924, this Dr. Dahan arranged a meeting between King Abdullah of Jordan, the King Hussein, the ancestor of the present King Abdullah of Jordan, writing here, who also passed away already, in 1924, and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonnefeld. He made that meeting, and they spoke about their loyalty, their friendship, and how the Jews are not aspiring to the state, and how they want to be citizens of friendship. And afterwards, a little while later, he was going to go to Parliament in England and let them know that the Jews do not want to stay. And the Zionists warned them that they're going to assassinate him. And they assassinated him in front of the Shari Tzedek hospital in Jerusalem. It's their own records. You can check that out. And let me just say, I'll have to go that with this basically just one or two things. Rabbi Dushinsky, who was 1947, was the chief rabbi, after Rabbi Zonnefeld passed away, Rabbi Dushinsky was the chief rabbi of Palestine. By the way, this book is called Historic Documents. Or then, you can see the facts of what the Jewish people of Palestine were true to the Judaism, what they wanted, and Jews around the world, how they were opposed to Zionism. In 1947, the United Nations sent a delegation to Palestine to hear out the communities if they want this ratification of the state. Now, mind you, I'm sure the Muslim community weren't dancing on the streets to create the state, and the Christian community didn't either want to be officially an Israeli state. But the Jewish community, they approached the Jewish community, so they went to the chief rabbi of Palestine. His name was Rabbi Dushinsky, and he spoke to them. He said, and he sent a message afterwards that it should be clear. And I'm just going to quote one sentence because I have to finish. He wrote like this: July 16, 1947, a declaration before the United Nations. We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And then there's a document 3 months later where he pleaded with them at least leave Jerusalem to the Secretary General of the United Nations. The Jewish Orthodox community, the president, comprising 60,000 souls, objects to the plea of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state or its residents becoming automatically citizens of the Jewish state. Our community demands that Jerusalem be an international zone on human protection for economy and so on. We do not want to be under this state. They will realize.
We as Jewish people believe, and this is what I'm ending with, we as Jewish people believe there is a rule to the world. We don't understand God's ways. We say that everybody, ultimately we can do, and whatever we can do, we try to do, we have to do what's right. But ultimately everything is in the hands of the Almighty. Just like the USSR overnight disappeared, and people thought it will never happen, and people were lost. For 70 years they couldn't practice their religion, and God helped, it came peacefully. There's a great God in this world. Don't be intimidated by something that's etched in stone and think that it's the power. Let us pray to God for the total, speedy, and peaceful dismantlement of this terrible growth called the State of Israel, this impediment to peace. And let us also know that we can't simply just by praying, we have to also stand up for the people of Palestine. We have to don't be intimidated. Be careful, don't call it a Jewish state, because then they'll be labeled anti-Semitic, which is exactly what the Zionists want. Call what it is. It's a Zionist state. It's not a Jewish state. Refer to it not as a Jewish state, which they want you to refer to as. It's a Zionist state, and let the world know. Don't be intimidated. You're not anti-Semitic. You're not a self-hating Jew. Stand up there and say, this is illegitimate. This is a selfish, total rebellion against God. It has no right to exist, and it's trampling on the rights of others. People are dying because they don't have medical aid, they don't have food, they don't have everything that's necessary in Gaza. We went as a delegation to Gaza with God's help. We embraced them. We have no problem with the leadership there. We have no problem with any political, with any Palestinian leadership or any Muslim leadership. They're not our enemies. So you should get up there and you should put pressure on the leadership. Let them know that the people are suffering. They're dying. They need freedom. They need their rights. They need their homes. They need their food. They need and they need at the end of the day freedom. Do for it and pray to God, and let us hope that we pray to God that we should ultimately see the day when the Almighty will reveal His glory throughout the world, where all humanity will recognize one God and serve Him all together in harmony. Thank you.
Anything like that, or United Nations. Jews have been living in armed Arab and Muslim lands for hundreds and hundreds of years. And in fact, it has been Arab lands, Muslim lands have been a safe haven for Jewish people throughout hundreds and hundreds of years, by the times of the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, and World War II. And any time in between, Jewish communities have flourished, and it's been a safe haven for Jews. And it has never been an issue of a difference of religion to be able to live in a harmonic coexistence, to be able to live in the same courtyard, in the same house. This has never been any problem. And therefore, it's mind-boggling, it hurts, it's a nakba, how everything has changed in the last 100 years. And why has it changed? It has changed because of a difference, a change in religion? Has Judaism changed? Or has Islam changed? The ones who are truly religious, the ones who are truly observing their religion, will say on the contrary, they're trying their utmost to uphold the religion as it was hundreds of years ago. There is no difference in the writing. And yet we find that there is this tremendous mistrust, there is this hate, animosity, fear of one of the other. So what has changed? I could take you on a tour of Egypt, to Jewish areas, where they lived, Jewish quarters, where I was just there, or I was just in Lebanon 2 weeks ago on the march to Jerusalem. You can go to any Muslim country and you will find that there is Jewish community.
With the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, His truth to all this gathering, people who, with God's help, will lead the future generation. And in so doing, we may be able to sanctify His name and bring peace to this world. God's attribute, one of God's attributes is shalom, peace, with God's help, amen. Firstly, I'd like to thank the students for Justice for Palestine, Hashem, and all the others who were involved here for making this happen, and for the university for allowing us to speak here. I really appreciate this. I'm humble. It's a great privilege to us. It's a requirement. We feel it's one of our requirements as one of our great leaders, Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine, nothing to do with the Israeli rabbinate. We don't recognize that, but truly the rabbinate of Palestine. Around 30-odd years ago, he passed away, and he said that it's a requirement of us to stand up and speak at the cost of our lives to let the world know that we are being falsely represented around the world by Zionism. So we feel for us it is a great privilege to be able to speak at this, especially at opportunities where you're speaking to, like I say, future leaders with God's help, and speak around the world to convey this message of peace, of godliness. So with God's help, we are certain that you will see a totally different narrative, a different history, and you will find that it is a real makba, and we can only turn to the Almighty to change what has evolved from this history, from Zionism and the State of Israel, to return it to what it was, and God's help to be able to serve God together as we've had for hundreds of years. So thank you all for coming. Basically, the subject that they've asked us to speak about, they called it Love Thy Neighbor, Jewish History, Coexistence, Relationship prior to the occupation of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. It hurts always when I read lines like that. It's like somebody comes over and they ask you, where are you living? I'm living in Virginia. You get along with your neighbors? Well, yeah, I get along with my neighbors. Why not? But you're Jewish, and your neighbors are Christians. How do you get along with your neighbors? You're two different religions. It's impossible. No, it's possible. I'm telling you, I get along. I can tell you this story and that story. And you know, and it's somebody who's listening to this, you guy's nuts. But he's asking questions. Like, what kind? It's just, you walk away from him. Yet when we speak about Palestine, or some people from a Muslim country, and it's almost natural. You lived in Iraq, you lived in Yemen, you lived in Tunisia. You're kidding. You lived in Palestine, you got along with your Muslim neighbors, and you have to start explaining and all that. Now that hurts. That is a real a knife in the heart. Why? Because Jewish people have enjoyed the graciousness, the hospitality, the friendship, the love of Muslim people prior to any human rights observing groups or communities, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish community centers, and places where the Jews flourished as very religious, God-fearing communities. It was never a problem. So why? What has changed? All of a sudden Islam teaches hate of Jewish people. Why? Is it beneficial for them that they should be considered by the world as racist? It really doesn't make sense. Years ago, hundreds of years ago, maybe that would have passed. You could have been a racist, and no other country would have condemned you.
Today, on the contrary, there's the United Nations, and you're condemned for being racist. So why is there this animosity? Why is it there seems to be a religious conflict? Well, the truth is, it's the works of Satan. It's the works of Shatan. There's anybody, if you're a person, well, I'm speaking, I hope, to a lot of people who believe in God. I know that we're ridiculed about the creation of the world. We're ridiculed about that there's anybody who controls this world. Well, we proudly state that we believe that there's a ruler to this world. There is the Almighty. And in Him we believe, and we believe that He controls everything. To Him we pray and we turn to bring peace and so forth. And we believe that it can't be anything else than the works of the Satan that could have allowed the creation of this state of Israel that has been created in the land of Palestine. Why? Because there is no reason or legitimization of creating this land, the state of Israel, in the Torah. There is nothing to do with it. We're very thankful to all involved who arranged this, and we're thankful to all of you who've given of your time. Time is precious. Everybody has a lot to do, and with God's help, we hope it'll be worthy of your time, that you will find that it is a great accomplishment. Now, the time is really not possible in such a time span, such a short period of time, to be able to convey all the issues that are involved and to explain what has been misconstrued throughout the well over 60 years, or over 100 years actually, of what is happening in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, what Zionism is, what Judaism is. But we hope just to open the window of opportunity to be able to give you a chance to be able to study this, to step back and to, out of the box, you would say, to step out of what you've been fed throughout your life, if you've been living in Western civilization. And then, unfortunately, even if you've been living in other parts of the world, a lot of times the news, the media, people have had a free ride with the media, what's called the mainstream media, that was basically in the hands, we believe, of the Zionist leading people. Either they were Zionists themselves, or they simply found it practical to go along with the narrative fed by Zionism in the world of what happened in Palestine, what the history was between Jews and Muslims and so forth. And we find this is a real knockdown, it's a real tragedy. And we hope, with God's help, we'll just give you the opportunity to step back, study the subject, and come to your own conclusions.